So math has always been a thing for me that is important. Dr. Nemeth, who wrote Nemeth Code, was literally like a grandfather to me, and I called him Pop. The morning that he died, ironically, I was doing a whole Nemeth workshop that day on using Nemeth with a different device. I was the first person notified that Dr. Nemeth had passed away, and that truly was the hardest day of my life, to have to present that day knowing that the person who wrote the Nemeth Code was no longer with us, and he was a person that meant a lot to me. But math is still a thing that is important, and I know that many of you as teachers, we struggle on things like how do students turn in their work with the Polaris using math. But a bigger question is, how do I create worksheets for my students to utilize, and we're going to answer some of that today. But the first thing I want to do is talk about the calculator. So that is found on the Polaris. If I type the letter U for utilities from the main menu,
calculator C.
The first thing I find is calculator C. So I could press the letter C or press enter.
Start calculator. Blank.
And I am now inside of my calculator. So one of the things that we need to decide is, are we going to be using UEB math or are we going to be using Nemeth Code? And there are still places all over the country. Some people use Nemeth Code, some people use UEB. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about not only using the calculator, but how do we find out things that we need to know when we're using the calculator. For example, how do I change my Braille grade? Well, we don't know. So I'm going to do H chord, and you're going to hear me say that a lot today. Chord, that's space with the letter H.
ConvertUnet, enter U, dots 1, help closed, blank, blank. ConvertUnet, enter U, clear display, backspace C, dots 1.
So if I go up at the top of this list, there are several items in this list. There's actually many items in here. So if I scroll down,
delete last number, add dots, minus, dot, multiply, divide, decimal, left parenthesis, right parenthesis, percent, to the power of, square root, permanent, pi, dot, exponent, fraction permanent, over, dot, n, spit sign, enter, arc sign, hyperbolic cosine, arc cosine, hyperbolic tangent, arctangent, hyperbolic, natural, common log, recall, delete all, save to variable, statistics, fraction function, decimal to fraction, return formula, general functions, enter G, copy to clipboard, set options, change calculator Braille code, backspace G, dots 1, 2, 4, 5, list item.
Backspace G is the command. I heard that. So I can now close out of help by doing space with Z.
Help closed. Blank.
And I can now toggle backspace with G.
Calculator Braille code, UEB math. Blank. Calculator Braille code, computer Braille. 0. Calculator Braille code, EMAth. Blank.
If I go back into help with H chord,
change calculator Braille code, backspace G, dots 1, 2, 4, 5, list item.
You're going to see there that it left me at the last place I was, but this is simply a list of tons of commands, as you saw that I was arrowing through, and I can do L chord to go to the top of this list.
Clear display, backspace C, dots 1-4.
Or I can do 4-5-6 chord to get to the bottom of the list.
Exit, space C, dots 1, 3, 5, 6, list item.
And it told me to exit is space with Z. So we're going to use that command. That's a global command anywhere in the Polaris. Space with Z to exit help.
Help closed. Blank. Blank.
And we can do, as much in the calculator as we want. We can do simple math equations. We can do conversions. We can do, just scientific calculations. Tons of things in the calculator, but let's just say something very basic. Let's say 5 times 8.
Multiplication done. 8.
And I see on my Braille display 5 times 8. If I press enter,
40.
I will see that I have 40 on my Braille display. So I can now jump in and go to history.
Calculation history dialog. 5 asterisk 8 equals sign 40.
And I see 5 times 8 equals 40. And I pressed enter with H to get my history. I want to copy this text to the clipboard. So if I press enter with C,
Copy complete. 5 asterisk 8 equals sign 40 1/4 list item.
that equation is now copied into my clipboard. I can do space with Z,
40.
and I'm still in my calculator. And I'm just going to press F1 with the letter W to open the word processor. That's a global command.
Task name word processor. Top of document.
And I'm now inside the word processor. So if I want to paste this calculation, enter with V to paste.
Paste.
And I see 5 times 8 equals 40. And for those of you who are reading Braille, you will see there that it is in Nemeth code. So that is one way that a student can take a calculation, copy it over to their clipboard, open the word processor, and paste it back into their document. So much like I would want to go back to my calculator and do another calculation, I can do F2, F3.
Task name settings. Task name Play Store. Light handle mid Play Store. Button navigate up enter key to select. Task name Team Viewer. Task name Team Viewer. Task name Zoom. Task name Play Store. Zoom. Current Play Store. Button navigate up enter key. Team Viewer. Button open quick support. Press the enter key to run. Task name quick support.
And I have many things open here, but if I press F1,
File manager.
the easiest way is just type U,
Calculator C 40.
go back in here, and we're still in our calculator. And so let's say that I want to do a conversion, for example. If I do enter with H or space with H again for help,
Exit space C dot clear display options. Change calculator. Convert unit. Enter U dots 1 3 6 list item.
convert unit, and I heard that say enter with U. So if I do Z chord here,
Help closed 40.
and we're now going to press enter with U.
Convert unit dialog. Unit distance combo box.
So we are in a combo box. We can down arrow through this list with a .4 chord.
Area combo box. Mass combo box. Volume combo box. Temperature combo box.
And we'll do temperature. I'll press enter on temperature. Actually,
Current unit.
I'll tab,
Celsius
sorry.
combo box.
And unit is currently Celsius. And I will say Fahrenheit, space.
Fahrenheit combo box.
I'm going to press tab, which is F3.
Change unit. Celsius combo box. Input number. Edit box.
And I'm going to say 32.
Number sign. 3 2. Convert button.
Convert.
32 Fahrenheit is 0E0 Celsius static box.
And we see that 32 Fahrenheit is indeed 00 Celsius, which we know is true. Space with Z.
40.
And I'm going to close out of my calculator by doing space with Z again.
Calculator C.
And space with Z one more time.
Utilities U.
And I am now back at the main menu. And I'm going to turn it back over to Thomas.
Excellent work, Mike. I really appreciate it. One of the questions that actually was brought up, I know we were going to hold questions to the end, but this was something that came up. Mark Nelson asked if we support TeamViewer, and the answer is yes, we do support TeamViewer. It allows you to share a screen, much like what we're doing with Zoom right now. But yeah, TeamViewer is definitely supported. Another question, is there a reason why the calculation is in the middle of the document? The answer is yes. Math mode places equations right in the center. So we're going to go ahead and hold off on the rest of the questions here, but go ahead and keep typing them into the chat, and we're going to answer them at the end. Next, let's go ahead and talk about Polaris Math. Polaris Math is what we call our graphing calculator. This is something that's powered by Desmos. and it is really powerful and really cool. So Mike, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Thomas. So the math editor, as we call it, Polaris Math, is really a tool that allows people to graph equations. You can even get very complicated, and you can, intersect multiple graphs, and you can save graphs as individual Braille files. You can also emboss graphs directly to a printer, or an embosser rather. So many things that we can do in Polaris Math. The first thing I'm going to do is stay on Utilities, where I am right now, and press Enter.
Calculator, C.
The first option there is Calculator. If I do a .4 chord, the next thing I will hear is Polaris Math.
Polaris Math, M.
And you heard the hotkey, or the shortcut key there would be M. So I will press Enter on Polaris Math.
1/1 list item.
And we have 1/1. That just simply means that we are now in a list where we can enter as many equations as we want, but we would have to enter each equation that we're going to graph manually. And sometimes, we may want to do that, but that typically is not how we use the graphing editor or Polaris Math. But we could do that if we chose to do it, although there's a much simpler way that we're going to talk about here in a moment. But again, I want to kind of look at some of the things that we can do in Polaris Math, as well as, again, make sure that we are in the proper grade for utilizing Polaris Math. So I'm going to do H chord.
Symbol picker, backspace S, dots 2, 3, 4, list item.
So we see the first item
Export, enter 8,
is export.
import,
Let's
enter
go.
dots 2-4, list item.
Let's go down and find something about change Braille grade.
History, save graph as exit, copy, cut, enter, paste, enter, delete, select current, select all, copy graph, symbol picker, set map code, axis, backspace, set map code, backspace G, dots 1, 2.
It's the same command as we had before in the calculator, backspace G. So let's just do that. So we're going to do Z chord to exit help.
Help closed. 1/1 list item.
And we're going to now do backspace G.
UEB input mode.
UEB
1/1 list item.
or
Nemeth input mode.
Nemeth.
1/1 list item.
And so, of course, we're going to use Nemeth. The next thing that I want to talk about is ways to look and find something, again, in help that we may not know. So what I want to do is go through help a little bit slower. I was scrolling down quickly because I was looking for a particular item. But let's say, for example, that we want to save a graph as a file. How do you save a graph as a file? So H chord.
Set map code, backspace G, dots 1, 2, 4, 5.
And it left us off at the same place we were before, so we'll do L chord to go to the top of the list.
Export, enter 8, import, history, save, exit, space C, save graph as Braille, enter F, dots 1, 2, 4, list item.
Save graph as Braille. So that's something that is interesting, at least to me, being a blind guy. I kind of want to look at graphs and see what they look like. So I am going to now do space with Z to exit help.
Help closed. 1/1 list item.
And so that is a bit about the graph editor and how it can be used. And the next topic that we're going to cover, which I'm just going to go ahead and do it, is the word processor. And so, we're talking earlier about students creating math assignments. One of the most challenging things that we all find as teachers and trainers and all of that is, how do students do math on a note-taking device? And we hear it all the time. And it is something that we feel that is very important. And it's something that when I travel around the country and I do workshops on the Polaris, I always, make sure that we cover some math in our workshops, because this is something that is not easy for teachers to necessarily teach to students. And I think that, if we can help cover that, it's important. So I'm going to do space with Z.
Polaris math.
Space with Z again.
Utilities, U.
And I'm going to press W for Polaris.
5 times 8 equal 40.
For word processor, rather. And we're going to do a Z chord.
No name, dot, save, yes prompt button.
I'm going to say no.
Word processor, W.
And I'm going to now press enter on the word processor again.
Top of document.
And we are now inside of a blank document. So the next thing that I want to do is see what grade of Braille my word processor is set to. And the easiest way to do that is to go into the file menu. So if I press F2 for the menu button, or what we call the Alt key. So just quickly, the buttons on the Polaris, in case you don't know. F1 is your menu button. It's like pressing Start on Windows or taking you to your desktop. F2 is like an Alt key, so it takes you in and out of menus within programs. F3 is Tab. If you want to go the other way, it's F3 with space, toggles you the other direction. And then F4 is like pressing the Escape key. The equivalent would be a E chord in Braille. I'm going to press F2.
File, F.
We're going to choose File.
New, N, dialog, enter and menu item.
And I'm going to go down to the Settings menu. The hotkey for it is E.
Open. Save as export, X, dial, print, P, settings, E, dialog, enter menu item. I'm
going to press enter on that. From anywhere inside of a document, enter with E would have quickly gotten me here.
Settings dialog. View format characters, F, no list item.
And we have a list. So if I down arrow .4 chord through this list.
Reading you, read open, automatic, auto scrolls, apply settings to all, home and move unit, the document name, math code, T, Nemeth list item.
The math code is set to Nemeth. If I want to change it to UEB, I press space.
UEB list item.
I'm going to press space again.
Nemeth list item.
And we're back at Nemeth. So I'll press enter here because that's what I want.
Option saved.
So I'm just going to type math. Well, let's put my name first.
M-I-K-E, Mike. God says T-I-N-D-E-L-L. Tyndall.
And we'll put the date.
Number sign 04 dash number sign 08 dash number sign 2020. April 8th. God says A. The math. Q. U. I. Z. Quiz. Enter.
Number 1.
Number sign 1. Lower D. 1.
Now, when you are entering math, in order to start math mode, whether it be in Nemeth or UEB, you have to be on a blank line in most instances, and we're going to explain the differences here in a little bit, but there is an exception, but we'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to press enter because I need to be on a blank line.
Enter.
And let's just say backspace with M.
Start Nemeth mode.
And let's say x squared
X. X2. X
equals
equal Y2.
Y squared. X squared equals Y squared. Now I want to graph that graph. So if I do enter backspace G, again the command is enter backspace G, this will take this x squared equals y squared, and it will take it into the math, Polaris math, what we call the math editor. It will enter it into the math editor, as well as show a visual image of what that graph looks like. So let's do enter backspace G.
X superscript 2 equal Y.
Hey, Mike, I'm going to just interrupt you real quick. I want to point something out. So as Mike typed out that equation, one of the things that some of you may have noticed is that as he typed it out, you could actually see the characters, not in Braille, but in text. You could actually hear the characters as they're typed, so there is character echo as well. So what this does is it makes math very presentable when you're working with a colleague, especially a sighted peer. So there's, you see it, not in Braille, but it's text, you can hear it, and it's very, very presentable and accessible.
So I have x squared equals y squared. I'm reading it in Braille, but let's just look at it. C chord.
X superscript 2 equal Y superscript 2.
There we go. And it's there. So I can now take my graph that we have here that is in print, for those of you who are sighted, and I can actually make a tactile image of that graph by doing the command enter with T. And if I don't know that command, if I go into help with H chord,
Save graph as Braille. Enter F dots 1, 2, 4. List item.
I'm going to scroll down.
Exit. Space. Copy. Enter. Cut. And paste. Delete. Select current item. Select all. Copy graph. Symbol picker. Backspace S. Set math code. Backspace. Axis. Backspace. Graph label. Graph style. Display tactile graph. Enter T. Dots 2, 3, 4, 5. List item.
Display tactile graph. Enter with T. So that is the command. I'm going to do a Z chord.
Help closed. X superscript 2 equal Y superscript 2. 1/1 list item.
And I want to put that in my document. I want to do that command now. So enter with T.
Converting image.
And on my screen, I now see a line, which is my x-axis, and I see a couple FOR signs with a couple symbols indicating my y-axis in the center of my Braille display. And the easiest way to take a good look at this graph in Braille, and for those of you who are sighted, watch the screen, what's about to happen. We're going to press the up and down scroll keys together. And I now see that my line is getting closer together. At the bottom of the screen, it's closing in.
So for those of you that are sighted, the sim Braille is at the bottom of the screen.
So we have now completed the entire graph, and I saw it in Braille. I'm going to do a Z chord here to close this, but I'm still in my math editor.
X superscript 2 equal Y superscript 2. 1/1 list item.
No, I'm just going to scroll. I'm going to scroll down here.
X superscript 2 equal Y superscript 2. 1/1 list item. X 2/2 list item.
And now I'm in a blank document. Thomas, give me another equation. What would be a good equation that you think might look good as a graph?
Sure. Let's just go ahead and do y equals 2x plus 3.
Y equals 2x plus 3. Okay, y. And as you notice here, I'm typing in my math editor. Y equals, I don't remember the equal sign, even though I used it earlier. I don't remember it. So I need to find it because I need to enter it into my equation. So the best way to do that is by using the symbol picker selector. So we're going to press F2.
File, F, pull down menu.
Actually, we're not.
Y2/2 list item.
We're going to press H chord, sorry. So we're going to do H chord.
Display tactile graph. Enter T. Dots 2.
And I'm going to scroll up to the top
Export.
with an
3.
L chord.
5. List item.
And I know that somewhere in here I heard symbol picker, so let me find it.
Import. History. Save. Exit. Copy. Cut. Paste. Delete. Select all. Copy graph. Symbol pick. Set math code. Symbol picker. Backspace S. Dots 2, 3, 4. List item.
Backspace S is my command. Z chord.
Help closed. Y2/2 list item.
And let's see if I can remember this backspace S they told me.
Symbol picker dialog. Basic function 1/3 list item.
So we've got basic functions,
Trigonometry 2/3.
trigonometry, that looks difficult,
Miscellaneous 3/3 list item.
miscellaneous. Let's try basic.
Basic function 1/3 list item. equal dot K1/30 list item.
Oh, it's the first one in my list. Thank God. 4623. Yeah, that's an equal sign. Let me press enter on it.
Y2/2 list item.
And now you can see here
Equal.
that it put the equal sign in here for me. So y equals 2x
B. X.
plus 3.
X. X. X plus 3.
All right, so now we have y equals 2x plus 3.
And
Let's,
Mike, you forgot the number indicator.
I certainly did, Thomas.
Number sign. Number sign.
There we go. All right, so now we are going to graph this again so I can take a look at it.
Please select at least one graph. Y equal 2x plus 3. 2/2 list item. Converting image.
And there we go. So up and down. So if you see, this is a lot different. So I now see these little, on the right-hand side of my Braille display, I see the line closing in, moving across my y-axis, and it is continuing to move left, and now I see it kind of crossing. Now it's moving more left. And it will go all the way to right there where it stops. So I'm going to do a Z chord,
Y equal 2x plus 3. 2/2 list item.
and I now want to save this graph as a tactile image. And if you remember, the command was backspace with the letter F. So I'm going to make sure.
Symbol picker, backspace S, export, enter, import, history, save graph, exit, space C, save graph as Braille, enter F, dots 1, 2, 4, list item. Help closed. Y equal 2x plus 3.
So I'm going to press the space bar to select this graph.
Space. X superscript 2 equal Y superscript 2. 1/2 list item. Y equal 2x plus 3. 2/2 list item. File save dialog.
I'm now in a file save dialog, so I can tab.
Type. BRL combo box. File name. Graph BRL edit combo box.
And the name is going to be Mike.
M-I-K-E. Mike.
MikeGraph.brl.
Type. BRL combo box. Confirm button. Save graph as Braille. Save complete. Y equal 2x plus 3.
So the file is now, that particular graph is now saved as a Braille file. So I can now go back up to my first
X superscript
graph.
equal Y superscript 2. 1/2 list item.
And let's just insert that graph directly into our Polaris Word document that we're creating. So I'm going to press enter with G.
Successfully inserted math graph.
So we now see that that graph has now been inserted into our document. So I'm going to do a Z chord and save it.
No name doc save. Yes prompt button. File save dialog. File name. No name doc
And I'm going to call it Mike
M-I-K-E. Mike. Number sign.
04
dash. Number sign.
08
dash. Numbers 2020.
2020. We're going to press enter here.
Saving. Save complete. X superscript 2 equal Y superscript 2. 1/2 list item.
We are now back in our Polaris math program. So we're going to exit out of there and close it.
File manager F.
And I'm going to open that math editor one more time.
Calculator C.
And I'm going to press enter on Polaris Math.
1/1 list item.
And you may remember earlier we did the change Braille grade backspace with G.
UAV input mode.
And we're now set to UEB for those of you who using USB math for now. So let's say that I want to find the equal sign in UEB. I know it's .5 low G, but let's say for whatever reason I forgot that. I can press H chord,
Save graph as Braille. Enter F. Dots
go
one,
down,
two,
find my little
4,
symbol picker,
Copy, cut, and paste, delete. Select current item. Space enter list item. Select all. Copy grant. Symbol picker. Backspace S. Dots 2, 3, 4. List item. Help closed. 1/1 list item. Symbol picker dialog. Basic function 1/3 list item. 1/1 list item. Equal 1/1 list item.
So we see
Equal 1/1 list item.
the equal sign is backspace low G.
Polaris math M.
So we're gonna bring this up again
1/1 list item.
and backspace with S.
Symbol picker dialog. Basic function 1/3 list item.
We're gonna press enter on that.
Equal 7. 1/30 list item.
And now we've got one of 30 commands. For some reason, my Polaris kicked me out, so I went back in here. Backspace dot low G 2356 is equals. If I scroll down a little bit,
Plus 6. 2/30 list item.
plus is backspace as a .5 lower F, and you're going to want your students reading this in Braille because if it's speaking it is a backspace 6, but in order to have them commit that to memory, they're going to want to know that the plus sign is backspace low F. We'll do one more.
Minus 3/30 list item.
Minus is the same, 3/6.
Plus minus. Plus sign. 4/30 list item.
And then you've got plus minus is ing.36. And there's 30 of these in here. So the nice thing is, whether you're using UEB or Nemeth, we can pick our symbols if we're not sure what they are. And if we press enter on any symbol, this plus minus, for example, we'll just press enter. And it has now inserted that into our graph editor. I'm going to do space with Z here.
Polaris math M.
One more time, space with Z.
Utilities U.
Last thing I want to do before I turn this over to Thomas is I'm going to go L chord for the top of my menu.
File manager F.
And I'm at the file manager. I'm going to press enter here.
Flash disk 1/3 list item.
And I'm going to press enter.
Books folder 1/9 list item.
I'm going to go D for documents.
Daisy folder 2. Documents folder 3/ training materials folder 1/17 list item.
M for Mike.
Math export BRL 7. Math sample doc. Math. Mike graph BRL 13/17 list.
We're going to press enter here.
Loading. Mike graph BRL open.
And I see my graph, and if I did I could go up to the top of the document. And you can see here as I'm moving down that I am now scrolling my graph. Space with Z.
Mike graph BRL 13/17 list item. File manager F.
We're going to go back into File Manager.
Flash disk 1/3 list item.
And since I'm a student, I've joined this class, and it's about math in the Polaris. I need to go to my Google Drive.
At Google Drive 3/.
So I scroll down, or I could type a G and press enter.
Classroom folder 1/30 list item.
My first folder is a classroom folder. I'm going to press enter on it.
Learning the Braille Sense Polaris P101 folder 1/2 list item.
Oh, I've got two things in here. I've got learning the Polaris. That's not what I want. So let's go down to the next one.
Math webinar folder P/2.
And I see math webinar. That's what I want to see. I need to see if I have any assignments in this folder. So I'm going to press enter on it.
No items list item.
Whew, I have no items here. So that means I have no work today. so I can take the rest of the day off, which is great. I'm going to do a Z chord,
File manager, F.
and I'm going to turn this back over to Thomas, and hopefully we're going to answer questions now, I hope.
Not yet, Mike.
No? Why not?
Well, I'm going to show people how to use Google Classroom real quick. With regards to math. You're not getting off that easy.
Well, I hope that doesn't involve me.
Oh, it sure does. You got an assignment ready.
What?
Yeah, we're going to do an assignment here.
All right, go ahead.
All right.
Current view is share. Double tap to hide toolbar.
Oh, let me stop sharing.
Button start annotation. Enter. Start my video. Enter
That's
key
all right.
to share. Button enter key to select.
All right. So I'm going to need a little bit of help here. Let's see. So I should be sharing my screen here. Can somebody type in the chat yes if you can see the screen?
I would have to type no.
All right, so there we go. Okay, so I got a bunch of yeses. That's awesome.
Thanks, Sal.
All right. So what I have going on here, I'm in Google Classroom, so classroom.google.com. I know a lot of you teachers are using it. And what I am in this particular instance is the teacher. So I've created a class. I'm just calling it Math Webinar. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Mike to work.
Oh.
So
and now I must also say I'm very nervous because I see that Susan Osterhaus is in the house. So, hi, Susan.
Better not mess it up.
That's right.
All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to just go ahead and click on the Create button here. I'm going to create an assignment. So I hit Create and I move my mouse down to Assignment. I'm going to click on this. And I'm going to go ahead and type Math 101 sample question. All right. I could go ahead and type in some instructions here. If I want him to, instructions go here. And then I could go ahead and add a file here. So actually, before I add a file, I want to show you guys something real quick. I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to go here into this, this Math 101 sample document. Now, so I've got this Math 101, just plain Word document, and I'm actually going to go ahead and add another question here. So I'm going to do question 4, solve the following equation. All right, I'm going to go do a new line. Now from here, Microsoft Word, if I go up here into my menus, if I go into the Insert tab, I go all the way over here to the far right, there's something here that says equation. So I could go ahead and click on the equation, and then it puts a box in the center of the document, and it says type equation here. So I can just go ahead and do 1 + 1, and then space equals, and then I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And now I'm back out of math mode in the Word document.
From iPhone to all.
So one other way that you could actually add equations directly into Microsoft Word, instead of going through the tabs, you could just go ahead and press the Alt key and equals. So pressing Alt equals skips all of that sort of stuff and just puts in the type equation there. And for those of you that are sighted, you'll notice up at the top, there's a lot of different options. So you could do different structures and symbol picker and all this sort of stuff. So Alt and equals is what we want for the keyboard command. So I think this is going to be fine. So I've got question 4, solve the equation, 1 + 1 equals, and then I left it blank. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Go ahead and close it out, minimize that. I'm going to go back here into Google Classroom. I'm going to click on the Add button. And what this is going to do is it's going to let me pick what I want to add for the assignment. So I'm going to go down to File, click on that. This is creates an upload dialog box. I'm going to select files from my device. And I'm going to choose my Math 101 sample document. Click Open. And then I'm going to click Upload. All right, so now that I have the file attached, I need to go over to the right-hand side, and there's a drop-down. It says Students can view file. Now, if you leave it just like this, that means the student will be able to read the document, but that's not what we want. This is an assignment, and so we want Mike to actually complete it. So I'm going to click this drop-down, And there's an option here that students can edit file, which seems like it would be the good choice, but it's not. So when a student can edit the file, that means every student can edit the same file. We don't want that. What you want to do is select make a copy for each student. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then in the top right-hand corner, there's an assign button. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. All right. Now, since this is a sample class and I've only got one student, which happens to be Mike, I could go over here and I could click on Mike and I could see that it is assigned. I didn't add a due date because I'm going to be nice and generous, but I could go ahead and see that it's been assigned to him. So Mike, how about this? How about I stop sharing my screen? I'm going to have you share yours and we're going to show people how you're going to complete this assignment using the Polaris. Sound good?
Sounds great. So one thing I want to ask Thomas, when you clicked on that make copy, that makes the file able to be edited at that point, correct?
Yeah.
Just
So
for clarification.
when I make a copy for all the students, what that does is it creates a copy of that document and places that document in each student's classroom folder so that each student has their own separate copy that they could do their own work.
Okay. I see a lot of good math folks here. I see Sarah's here. I see Susan's here. So I just want to say personally to all of you who know me, welcome. I'm going to type S for share screen.
Sheets. Slides. Sheets.
Whoops.
You gotta get back into Zoom.
I thought I was.
File manager. F.
So we're going to go all applications
Calendar.
with A, and we're going to type the Z for Zoom
Zoom.
and press enter.
Current view is active speaker.
There you go. Now we'll do S for share screen.
Start my video, enter key to share. Button enter key.
Press enter on share.
Button photo enter key.
We'll
to
type
select.
S for screen.
Button screen enter key to select.
Press enter there.
From Lori Becker to all. Make sure when you type a page of chat showing items 20.
All right. So one of the things that I will say is I spent a lot of time earlier showing you help
Hey,
because
Mike,
I know
Mike, we're not seeing your screen. Can you go ahead and share it again?
that
Button yes enter key to select.
There you go.
Button yes enter key to select. List from Susan Osterhaus to everyone enter key to select.
oh, you see my screen now?
Button yes
Nope.
enter key to select. List from iPhone to everyone enter key. Button what should you do if you try to open a document? List from Sarah Larkin to everyone. Button I see you are using equation editor. Does it work? List from Laura Becker to everyone enter key to select. Current view is active speaker. Double tap to start my video enter key to select. Share. Button enter key to select. Button photo enter key to select. Button screen enter key to select. Alert. Zoom will start capturing everything that's just checkbox not checked. Button cancel. Press the enter key to button start now.
There we go.
Now you should be seeing my screen.
Yep.
All right. So
File manager.
as I was saying that I was showing the help command a lot because I want your students and you to be able to show your students the easiest way to find help when they don't know it. And then, of course, they're going to memorize those keystrokes, what's important. So let's go into my file manager.
Flash list 1 slash.
I'm going to type G for Google Cloud or Google Drive.
Google Drive 3/3 list
I'm
item.
going to press enter on it.
Classroom folder 1/30.
And I see Classroom. We'll press enter on it.
Learning the Braille Sense Polaris P100. Math webinar folder 2/.
Math webinar. I don't want to, but I'll press enter anyway.
My Tyndall, Math 101
Oh.
sample.docs 1/1 list
So
I'm
actually,
glad this is.
can I have you hold up just a second?
Sure.
One thing I want to point out to people is that Mike is in this Google Drive folder on his Polaris. Now, why that's so significant is that we've actually built our own Google Drive integration. And as you'll notice, what he's doing, everything's in a list. Everything's really easy to navigate, open, and all that sort of stuff. So he's actually in Google Drive right now, and it's our own proprietary app. And so he's actually accessing this document on the cloud directly from the Braille Sense Polaris without having to use the Google Drive app, which is accessible but quite difficult to use. So this is a fantastic feature, and everybody I've spoken to says they absolutely love this.
So I do see that Thomas gave me this thing, and I'm glad it says Math 101 because let's see how far we get here.
1 objects copied. My Tyndall, Math 101 sample loading. My Tyndall, Math 101 sample.docs open.
Now you heard that say copying before it said loading, because basically what it did is it downloaded this file from the server, put it onto my Polaris, and then it opened it. I'm going to do L chord to go to the top.
Top of document math.
Math 101. Name. So I put my cursor there. Mike.
M-I-K-E. Name Mike. Dot set.
T.
T.
I-N sign.
I-N.
D-E-L-L.
E-L.
And we're going to make sure that I can
Apostrophe L.
spell my name or not. Scroll down. We see date. So I'm just going to say
Number sign. 04 dash. Number sign. 08 dash. Number sign. 2020.
scroll down. Question 1. Solve the following equation. Period. I see this in constructed Braille. Number 1 says 1/2 plus 1/4. So I'm going to say that is 3/4. I'm going to route my cursor to the end. And notice that I will not have to enter or exit math mode, because the device knows that I'm going to be entering a math equation because there's already a math equation on this line. So 1/2 plus 1/4 equals
Open fraction. 3 over 4. Close fraction.
Scroll down. Question 2. Solve the following equation when x is equal to 2, okay? So 2 times 2 is 4 plus 3, I'm going to say 7.
Numbers G.
Hope I'm right.
G. Space G. 7.
I've forgotten, wrote that in UEB. It's actually in Nemeth. Question 3. Solve the following equation when x is equal to 2 again. Okay. X squared, so I guess that's 2 squared. That'd be 4 plus 2. I'm going to say 6.
Number sign. 6.
Question 4. Solve the following equation. 1 plus 1. Oh.
Number 2.
I'm glad you got that one right, Mike.
End of document.
Okay, so I'm going to say
Got 6. P-L. Got 2. F-E, please. G-I-V-E-A-N-A-A. I-T-R-I. Tried. V. Very. H-L-D. Hard. O-N-R. D. This. Got O. Lower D.
now if you see here, I want to read this line out loud. C chord.
On this one. Please give an I tried very hard.
Please give an A. I tried very hard
This one.
on this one. And I want to show that because I went to the bottom of my document, which was outside of the math equations, and I simply wrote in contracted Braille, which means that, there's no turning math mode on, turning math mode off, none of that. The device knows whether I'm in an equation or not. So I'm just going to save my file Z chord.
Mike Tyndall. Math 101 sample. Doc save. Yes prompt button.
I'm going to press enter, and it knows where the file came from, so it will put it back where it found it. So I'm going to press enter, and it will automatically save and upload directly into the proper class.
Saving. Save complete. Uploading. 0% sign. 100. Done 1 files uploaded. Mike Tyndall. Math 101 sent. Classroom folder 1/30 list item.
All right, so if I go into my classroom folder here,
Learning the Braille Sense Polaris. Math webinar folder. Mike Tyndall. Math 101 sample. Docs 1/1 list.
I see that I have my file. If I press enter,
1 objects copied. Mike Tyndall. Math 101 sample. Loading. Mike Tyndall. Math 101 sample. Docs open.
and I see
Top of document.
my file. Name is Mike Tyndall, just as I made it. So Z chord,
Mike Tyndall. Math 101 sample. Docs 1/1 list item.
and there we go. It did not ask me to save because it's already been saved. I'm now going to turn this back over to Thomas, and hopefully he has graded my assignment by now.
Well, let's go ahead and check this. All right. So
Let me stop sharing. Did you stop my screen, Thomas?
Yeah, I stole the screen back from you. So,
Okay, great.
People should be seeing my screen now. So I'm back here in my Google Classroom, and I want to see how things are going. So going back to I'm in the classwork tab here in Google classroom, and then there's my Math 101 sample questions. I can click on this here. And there's a document. Let's see specifically what Mike did. I'm going to click on People. I'm going to click on Mike Tyndall. And there's a document that we gave to him. I'm just go ahead and click on this. And it should open directly up in a preview. All right. So one of the things that people always kind of question about this, especially with Google Docs and the previews, is that the previews within the preview of Google Docs with math, they don't actually show equations. So you actually have to open it in Google Docs. You can't just check it out on the preview. So I'm going to go ahead and click Open with Google Docs. And have it load up here. And loading up, and there we go. So I'm actually going to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. All right, solve the following equations. Half plus a quarter equals 3/4. That looks good to me. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Looks like you got them all correct. And when I click in here, you'll actually notice that everything is actually an equation. If I were to download this to my computer as a Microsoft Word document, they would still be equations in Microsoft Word. So math equations are cross-compatible across Google Docs, Polaris and the word processor, and also Microsoft Word. So completely accessible, and by far the best option out there when it comes to doing math. So I see Mike did a good job. Congratulations, Mike, you passed.
Oh, thank you. I was scared.
All right. All right, so it is 4 minutes to 3 p.m. So we've covered about everything that we're going to cover today. So I'm going to go ahead and go through some of these comments, and Mike, I'm going to need your help to answer some of these. So
Sure.
if you have a question, you could go ahead and type it into the chat, or if you feel bold enough to talk with the rest of the group and you want to use your voice, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll call on you and unmute you. You can ask your question and we'll try to answer it here.
And
So,
just FYI, if we have any blind users using a computer with Zoom and you wish to raise your hand, the command is Alt-Y.
all right. So let's go ahead and go through some of the questions. Does Polaris support TeamViewer? We already answered that. The answer is yes. Is there a reason why calculation is in the middle of the document? When you're creating equations in Microsoft Word and also in Google Docs sometimes, it puts the equations in the center of the document to denote that it's an equation. So Mike, this one's for you. Can you use first letter navigation in the help area?
You cannot use first letter navigation in the help area, no.
Okay. Next question, will there be notes or a copy of this webinar for later study? Yeah, absolutely. So after this webinar is done, we are recording it. We will put it live up on YouTube, and you will receive an email letting you know when the webinar recording is available. Tim Rowe, off topic, I know, but is there a way to access the notification bar in the top screen? The answer is yes. You press space with dots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all together.
And let me just also very quickly, Thomas, interrupt you and say, for anyone who maybe did not get the announcement yesterday, there is a new release for the Polaris. So have your Polaris plugged in, connected to Wi-Fi. From the main menu, press F1. You'll get main menu. The letter U twice. You will hear Upgrade Polaris Online. Press Enter on that. Let the machine download, reboot. When you hear you may get your user guide, do Z chord to exit it, Y to close the dialog, and then you will be at File Manager. Once you are at File Manager all together, you're going to press space, backspace, enter, and the letter F as in Foxtrot, and that will reinitialize your applications, and then your machine is up to date. So anyone who did not get that release, feel free to go update your note taker to the latest build.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you. All right. So how presentable is math when I present it as an assignment to a teacher? For those of you that are sighted, you got to see that it is very presentable. For comparison to some of the other note takers out there, we have character echo. You could see each character as it's typed, not in Braille, but it's in text. If you do care about seeing it in Braille, of course, the Braille display will show it to you. There's also Sim Braille at the bottom of the screen if you've got it connected to a monitor or using TeamViewer. Another question is, can you solve a system of equations and have it give you the intersecting points? Mike, do you know the answer to that?
So what you can do is if you have multiple graphs, you can select each graph that you want to be graphed by pressing spacebar on each graph, and that will select it. So say if you have 3 graphs in your math, Polaris math, you can select the first one, select the last one, and then have them show as if they were one equation.
So the question is, if we have 2 equations and they intersect, is there a way to determine where those points intersect?
Well, you're going to see it in Braille. You can, I mean, there's not going to be anything there that says where the 2, equations are written in Braille, but you will be able to see the graph in Braille.
Okay. And you can figure that out using the calculator if you'd like. Can you show us how this tactile graphic file will look in Duxbury? Unfortunately, we can't do that today. We don't have Duxbury installed on this particular computer, so we can't show you how that would be done.
I will just say to you, though, that if you really do not even need Duxbury because you can emboss it directly from the Polaris. If you need to emboss it using Duxbury, you would take that Braille file. So you would save it as an image with enter with F, as I showed you earlier. Save your file as a BRL file. Send that file over to Duxbury, and then just emboss it.
Okay. So we've got Kathleen with her hand raised. I'm going to unmute you now, Kathleen.
Okay. My question is, I have a MacBook Air 2015, and I just like to know, I'm able to pair with my Polaris, but I can't read my work when it's paired. I paired it with Bluetooth, but I don't know what to do from here. What should I do?
But Kathleen, leave her unmuted for 1 second. When you say you can't read your work, what do you mean by you can't read? Or you mean this not working as a Braille display?
I'm just saying it's able to pair, but I can't read my work. Like it comes on top of each other. What should I do from there?
I missed what you said. I can't read my work. What's after that? I can't read my work.
And it's like on top of each other when I paired it to my MacBook Air.
Okay, you're cutting out something on top of each other.
When I pair my Polaris to my MacBook Air, it's like on top of each other. The words.
The words.
I'll tell you what you need to do is give our technical support department a call on that one today. We're just covering math. But I will tell you that we are going to be doing another webinar on using products with other devices. So things like using, okay, go ahead and mute her there, Thomas, please. Sure. Using things like the Q-Braille, using it with iOS, using it with the Mac, using it with the PC. And we can also cover, in those webinars, the Polaris can be used as well as a Braille display with other devices, and that will be covered in another webinar coming up.
All right. Another question. When you save the graph as a BRL file, does it not save all the formulas on the graph?
If there's only one graph selected, it should save all the formulas. If there are multiple equations in your math editor, you want to select the equations that you want to be included by pressing space on them, and then the equations that you select will be entered as one graph. But you're not going to be able to physically read the equation in Braille. You're basically going to see a picture of the graph.
Okay. Somebody asked the question, what should you do if you try to open a document in your folder that is in Google Drive and nothing happens? I'm using the Google Drive feature from the file manager. So there's actually a couple things that could be going on here. First of all, if you're pressing enter on a file and it's not opening, there's a chance that it was originally created as a Google Doc If that's the case, you're going to want to copy that file to your flash disk and then paste it back in to your Google Drive file, and that will actually create a docx file, which should behave a lot better. There's also a whole host of different options that could be causing that. If you haven't updated your firmware yet, I highly recommend that you do so, because in this latest firmware build, it gives you the ability to open and save directly from Google Drive. If you're running an older firmware version, then those features were not built in just yet. So update your firmware, and that will most likely fix your issue.
I also want to say, Thomas, before I say this, do we have any more questions?
Yeah, we got quite a few. But go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So Sarah Larkin asks, I see you're using equation editor. Does it work with math type as well? I don't know for certain, but my best guess is yes. And Sarah's question actually brings up something I want to talk to people about. For those of you that are teachers, we are going to be putting on a webinar specifically about creating or taking documents, especially with a focus on math, and converting them into accessible formats. This is not something that's going to necessarily be related to HIMSS products like the Polaris. We'll talk about it briefly, about cross-compatibility and that sort of thing. But we're going to take a look at different software options out there that are going to take, something like a PDF with math equations. How do you turn that PDF with math equations into an accessible format? And we have found some really great tools that should work in just about any environment, one of which is math type. Sarah, actually, if you want to join us on that webinar as a co-presenter, we'd love to have you. So a comment, make sure when you type a page of problems in Word that you disable automatic numbering as when it's on. Every time the student edits the document to complete the problem, it adds a number to each line in the margin. That is a very good tip. Sarah asked, did Tom also need to enter all equations on that next line? I don't know what you're referring to. Sarah, if you're still here, go ahead and type a comment or raise your hand if you're still here, and provide a little bit more context. Susan Osterhaus said, Mike, you get an A+. I'm assuming that's with your 1+1 answer.
Susan, you've always bailed me out. Thank you. You're still doing it.
So somebody asked, what are some of the higher level, what about some of the higher level equations? For the most part, it's pretty good. When you start getting into things like differential calculus, I think there are going to be some limitations. But I mean, if you're in a super advanced class in college for math, you might run into some limitations. But I'm going to say for about 95% of people, it's going to be just fine. Mike, did you want to add?
No, you're good.
Okay. Somebody wrote, I see the teacher didn't receive a notification that he had turned it in. Yes, that is a very good point. So when Mike completed the assignment in the word processor, he simply saved it back to the Google Drive folder. So his document was there. We didn't show you guys about using Google Classroom on the Polaris to actually turn it in. He could go back to the assignment in the Classroom app and click a turn in button, and then I'll get the notification. But we withheld that part just for the sake of time. So,
but if Thomas is a good teacher, he's going to go to my folder, his classroom every day, and he'll just see Mike Tyndall's assignment. So he knows, Mike Tyndall did something, so he better check it.
Because Mike Tyndall is my favorite student. And in fact, for this class, he is my only student. So
Thank you, Professor.
I would like to see how the Braille for calculus or stats equations back translate for a sighted teacher.
Let me just answer that one, Thomas. And we could actually, Susan, Sarah, those of you who are here, no one at HIMSS is like a major math wizard. And in order to really show this effectively, we need someone who is a math wizard. So if there is a person who feels that you are a math wizard and you want to help us and co-present on doing some of this high-level math stuff, I am more than happy to work with you and do it. But sometimes we get questions even in our support department, like, can you show us how to, graph a parabola, for example? And somebody in tech support emails me and they're like, a parabola? And I'm like, yeah. And some of those things, are higher than some of us ever took. And I do know that this is something that does need to be covered. And as I said, if there's anyone who wants to co-present something, I would welcome an email as I fall out of my chair. I would welcome an email at mike@hims-inc.com. If anyone would want to volunteer and co-present with me on a webinar doing higher equations of math, I would love it, but it's going to take someone with more math expertise than moi.
All right. All right, let's keep on going. Man, we got an active group here. I like it. All right. Any hints for linking Polaris to iPad using TeamViewer?
Okay, guys, let's hold off on any questions today. And that's what I was going to mention, and I'll do it now. We are going to have, and Thomas, if you can maybe get the date so that we can quickly just talk about this. We are going to have a webinar, and we're going to do it in the evening when everybody can kind of be around. I mean, we're in, coronavirus mode right now, and a lot of people are home. So we wanted to schedule this webinar later in the evening so that people, are done with dinner and they can kind of be around. We're going to kind of be around one evening, and we're going to open it up just for any questions about whatever you have. And myself and Jenny and Earl and Thomas and Randy, our CEO, everybody is going to be here on that webinar to kind of answer any questions that anyone has. But as far as, today, let's just keep this directly to math. If you do have other questions that need to be answered immediately, we certainly are here for you, and we certainly want to answer your questions. I would urge you, email us at support@hims-inc.com or call us directly at 888-520-4467. Again, that phone number is 888-520-4467, and our support address is support@hims-inc.com. Do not email Mike. Do not email Thomas. Email support. That is the best way to get your answers in a timely fashion. And if the support people need to involve us, they will reach out, and that way everything is filed and logged, and no one is like getting 2,000 emails.
All right. Let's keep on going here. So I got a note that it's 5 down there in the deep south. Oof. So let's go ahead and actually, Kyle, I'm going to unmute you and go ahead and ask your question.
Kyle McKinney, I'm glad to see you joined. I'm sorry this morning I was in a conference call when you called me. I'm glad you got a hold of Earl. Go with your question, buddy.
Quite all right, gentlemen. Thank you for your message this evening, and congratulations on your test, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
One quick thing for you, Mike, that you mentioned during this webinar. What, how do I update my Polaris again to the latest? What was your quick command for that?
From the main menu, the letter U for utilities, the letter U again for upgrade online. Press enter there. Basically, have your machine plugged in. Once it updates and it reboots, you will get to your device, depending on how you have it set up. It may bring you up to the user guide. If it does, do a Z chord, press Y to close it. You'll be at File Manager. If your machine boots up to File Manager, you're good. Just skip all the stuff I just said about the user guide because it does not apply to you. Once you get to File Manager, press space, backspace, enter, F as in Frank, and that will reinitialize all of your default apps, which is something that we recommend that everyone does after you update. Again, at File Manager, space, enter, backspace, F as in Frank.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to remember all that. I'm not as good of a student as you are. I'm working on it. And another thing, you mentioned about a webinar for teachers making certain classroom apps accessible from PDF. Since I work for Louisiana Accessible Education Materials Center, how do I get notified, or am I already, since I'm on this meeting, will I be notified of all your upcoming webinars so I can let teachers at the Louisiana Special School District know about this making files accessible webinar?
Thomas, go ahead and take that question. And Thomas, also give us the date on that Let's Ask Kim's Anything webinar.
Sure, sure. So, Kyle, I've got a note here to make sure that I send it to you personally. We don't have that particular one scheduled just yet. We're still doing research and testing for that particular webinar. Believe it or not, we actually do that sort of stuff. But yeah, we have your email contact information. You will get an email notification once we have the date and time set for that webinar. And we will definitely reach out to you. For those of you that want to go ahead and check out all of our webinars, you can go to hims-inc.com/webinars. And that's where you're going to find a list of all of our upcoming webinars. And there's a section there for past webinars where you can access the YouTube video recording. So once we have the dates and times, you're going to see that in the upcoming webinar section. So check back often, and you should be able to find that. But we will send you an email, Kyle.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. All right, Kyle, you are now muted. All right, Diane.
Oh, good morning, everyone. I'm from New Zealand, Mike, so I hope you can cope with my accent.
I love New Zealand.
We love it too, but we're in lockdown, so we don't.
As we all are, yes.
My question, well, one of the comments, I would have loved to see the graph file in Duxbury so that we could actually see how it would emboss, because I'm interested to see how it coped with labeling the axes and things like that. I also am really interested in that whole issue of senior level mathematics, and I'm not talking university level here, although that would be fun to see, but secondary, you know, higher levels of secondary school, when you're getting into complex algebraic equations and calculus and the symbols for statistics, which can be really challenging.
Sure.
And it's the back translation, because being able for the student to be really independent and just be able to hand work back to a sighted teacher, that would be great for me. So that's where I'm coming from. So I'm really,
as I mentioned earlier, I would be more than happy to do a webinar like that. I will just need the assistance from someone who is, you know, really good in math. So again, if anybody's willing, I'm more than willing to do it. And the other thing I will say is that if you have access to a Polaris and you save a document as a Braille file, if you have a copy of Duxbury, as I said, just take it over there and you can have a look at it. If you do not have a copy of Duxbury, you could download a demo version of Duxbury from their website, and that would also show you, you know, how the file will look if you do not have a copy of Duxbury. I believe that just when you're embossing a file and you do not have a copy of Duxbury, it's going to put demo inside your document several times.
yeah. Well, I mean, I do have that option, and I can do that. I also would think that if a student looked at that file, or a teacher looked at the Braille file, you could actually add things in that were missing. You could add in the equation.
That would be, if you're using Duxbury, yes, that would be true.
Okay. That's me done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and we're glad you're here all the way from New Zealand.
It's morning here.
So. Yes, I hope you're having your coffee.
Wonderful.
I'm about to have my wine.
So we've got people from New Zealand to Korea on here and everywhere in between. That's great. All right, Diane, I'm going to mute you now. All right, so let's go ahead and get through a couple more of these questions that are written down. Can you confirm you bring in all kind of math content into the word processor? For the most part, yeah, you can bring in all kind of math content. To be honest with you, I don't know of any limitations. Mike, do you know of any limitations?
Well, I think that, I mean, again, it depends on, without myself just trying things, making sure that I know that they work. I'm not going to promise you that they will. For example, I have not tried a math type document. I have heard that it doesn't work if you're using math type, that you need Duxbury to make that file a BRF or a BRL. But again, these are all things that I would urge you to definitely come to Thomas's webinar about creating accessible documents. And by that time, we will have done a lot more kind of diving into this and seeing exactly what works and what doesn't work. Today, we kind of wanted to, show you basically what the Polaris is capable of doing. And we brought up that, issue about creating an accessible document because you are able to use Word and do some basic creation. As it gets more complicated, then we need other tools, and that's where Thomas's other webinar is going to pick up.
Well done. Question, is that assignment actually submitted in Classroom or is it just uploaded? We've already answered that one, but of course it was typed before it was answered. So just a reminder, when he saves the file from the Polaris, it is not marked as submitted, but it does upload the work that he's done back to Google Drive. So all he has to do is go into Google Classroom and click the Turn In button. Another question, is Google Drive feature a new update or is this available to the current update? So we just released...
Let me just stop you, Thomas, right there and say, if you have not updated your Polaris, if you're running anything older, we've been working very hard on the new update to the latest firmware. I cannot specify that strongly enough. We have taken Google Drive. In a previous update, the last update, you could download files and view them. You could save files to Google Drive by copying and pasting files, but you could not download them, edit them, and then upload them again the way that you saw today. That is all of the newest firmware. But again, make sure before you call tech support to tell us that something isn't working, if you are not on the latest firmware, please make sure to update your machine.
All right.
Somebody's unmuted there.
Yep, we've got Jenny Axler here. I've unmuted her if Jenny wants to pitch in.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was unmuted.
Okay, Jenny.
Good morning. Okay, so there are several things that I want to clarify here.
Yep. So can you clarify specifically about selecting the graph? You don't select it with space, do you?
Yes, no, you use space enter. That's the first thing. So I've been listening to various things. So yes, let me cover several issues here real fast.
And actually, Jenny, before you go on, can you introduce yourself, who you are and what you do?
They know who she is.
I do think most people know me. I'm Jenny Axler. I actually, I worked for the HIMSS Austin office for about 3.5 years. Then I transferred to our Korean office. So I am now on my Thursday morning here in Korea. And I work for international tech support, product planning, beta testing, localization, international marketing, just various international functions here at the headquarters. So sometimes I sort of know what's coming a little bit in development. So I sort of wanted to clarify a few things. So one of the questions was about adding graphic labels. This is something that we have been asked before and that we will probably try to improve. It doesn't do that right now. It is just the straight graph. The other thing is that Desmos has actually improved their Braille output so that it feels a little bit more like a traditional graph. If you try this, you can tell what the graph looks like, but the symbols are a little bit interesting. So this has been improved, and there are, I think, some improvements that we can make to make this appear more clearly when you do emboss or view the tactile graph, including the labels and like I said, even the shape of the symbols and how things are shown on the XY axis. So I think that we will actually try to do that in a future upgrade to make this a little bit clearer. Let's see. So math type, I know Thomas's theory is that it should be supported because the equation editor is generally using that. However, we have found that it is not, and our developer confirms that it is not currently. Having said that, when Thomas does his webinar on converting documents, there are probably methods that you can use to make that supportable. However, the best way to deal with this is to actually use the equation editor. That will always work, and you can be sure about that. I don't know if it's the specific way sometimes that a math type document is exported. I really am not sure. My developer just basically says we don't support that right now. So to be certain that your document will be supported, I would use the equation editor until you learn of other tools to convert your text.
And on that, we are going to, like I said, we're testing and evaluating the different software options. And so that is going to be a webinar that we are doing. And I highly recommend, if you're a teacher, join us for that webinar. It should help clarify a lot of questions about how to convert documents into something accessible.
Regarding calculus and all of that, we haven't. So here's the thing. We do have a few advanced math users who have given us information as they're using it about what works and what doesn't. Our developer is very, very advanced math, so he understands it even if we don't. So if you find
That's great.
So if you find something that is not working for you or doesn't seem to be showing up correctly, he will at least understand it. And a lot of times I just give those things directly to him if I'm not able to know for sure if it works. But we have found that if it doesn't work, we're able to fix it. So, and at this point, we fixed a lot of things. So I would think that you're not going to find too much that is problematic. And usually it's not so much in the input, it's there might be a little bit in the output. If we don't have a lot of people using these functions, we don't necessarily get the feedback or know for sure. But we did have a couple of advanced math users last year who were able to give us a lot of feedback, and we've been able to clear that up. Sarah Larkin's also been extremely helpful with that. So if you find that something's not working or something doesn't appear correctly in UEB or Nimith, please let us know, and we can generally fix it rather easily. Let's see. Is there anything else? Nope, I think that's all I had.
Okay.
Well, so thank you, Jenny.
One of the comments that we got from Cody Mitchell, who is with IRE AT in the Pacific Northwest, they're our dealer. He wrote, Desmos equations can be pasted into math type, just an FYI. Thank you for that comment, Cody. Susan Osterhaus wrote, have you tried connecting a graffiti to a graffiti to see the full graph? Have we tried that out?
We have not tried that out, but we personally, because we don't have one, but we did actually work with APH last year to make sure that it does work. They do have a Polaris and they tested it, so we know it does work.
Wonderful. Another question for the teacher creating a document in Word. Does the equation have to be entered on its own line, like Mike did when he was in the word processor? Most teachers put the problems on the same line as the problem numbers. So the answer is that yes, they should put the equation on a separate line, even when you're creating equations within Microsoft Word. That is because if you have something like a mix of text, or you number it, so, number, 1 period space 2x plus 3 equals y, that 1 period is technically is an equation. So best practice, even within Microsoft Word, is to have math equations on their own lines. But that's going to be something that we're going to cover in the upcoming webinar.
You actually don't necessarily have to do it if you use Nimith to do the problem numbering. If you type $.2 and then
Right.
4.6 for the period, you can do it on the same line. It's just that if you do that, you need to make sure not to use literary braille for the numbering.
Yes.
So
Yes. And when you're typing into a Word document, to provide more clarification, if on a line you type 1 period and then you insert an equation next to that 1 period, that 1 period and the equation are going to be separate as well. So you got to be careful. It's just the way that Microsoft Word handles math. And in fact, one of the great things about the Polaris is that it handles math very similarly to how Microsoft Word handles math. So there's a cross compatibility.
And let me also quickly say that if you are a teacher and you are using a file that a student sent you as a docx file, you are going to want to open your file back up in Word so that you can see all the graphs and the equations that have been used. If the math editor has been used, you want to open those files in Microsoft Word.
Yeah, the equations also do show up in Google Docs if you're going to be using that.
Okay.
Comment that we received: the challenge is often to get the class teacher to use the equation editor in the class worksheet, not just typing in Word. Yes, that is definitely a challenge, but we have actually found that there is a fairly quick workaround to teachers that are just typing equations literary, and that will be covered in the upcoming webinar. Another question. I'm interested to know what Braille students think of reading the graphs of Graphing Calculator on the Polaris. What do the students really get out of this in comparison to the full page tactile graph? Mike or Jenny, do you want to speak to that?
I personally think that you still need to deal with tactile graphs. A lot of times they will appear in the hard copy textbooks, and you need to have them looking at them that way. You may need to actually make tactile representations yourself. So here's the thing. The electronic note taker is great for a lot of purposes. It does very many things well, and it's really amazing that students can create their math assignments here and be able to output them for teachers, etc. And as I explained, if you emboss it, of course, that's going to make a difference too. And Desmos is also improving, the way that they handle that. So we should be able to implement improvements on how it looks. But I am a firm believer that you shouldn't throw away all your old school tools. Especially when something is a visual representation and you need a tactile representation. Something, sort of like the graffiti is a good idea, sure, but that's expensive. You can make hard copy, you can emboss, you can use textbook, but I really believe that in some instance, and this is one, that at least to help the students understand initially what the graphs look like for different equations, you should use full page tactile images, yes. But again, that's my personal opinion.
I would agree with that, Jenny. There's those of us who are blind. I mean, I'll just say for me, and it's a pet peeve, but if I'm going to read the Bible or if I'm going to read my bank statement, I want those in hard copy Braille.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so moving on real quick. All right, comment, thank you for fixing so many things so quickly. You're welcome. Question, what about when you're using UEB, thinking of the issue of new line for equation numbering?
Specifically, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understood. Is that what we answered before, actually?
So when you're in UEB math, the issue of a new line for question numbering. So if you put, 1 period space and then the equation with UEB math, are there any issues with that?
It's going to be the same as we said. With Nemeth, you have to use Nemeth numbering to do it. In UEB, it would be the same. You could, if you needed it to be on the same line, you would have to use the UEB symbols for UEB math instead of using literary.
Okay, awesome. Somebody commented, this sounds like a really great webinar. Thank you. Can the Word file be emailed to the student instead? Their district does not use Google Classroom. The answer is absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
All you have to do is attach it and send the email. The student can save that attachment and work on it directly from the Polaris, just like Mike showed you from within the word processor. Absolutely.
Sure, and you can also provide it on a USB drive. Well, I know right now everybody's working remotely, so email makes sense. But yeah, but any form, as long as it's available from the file manager in one form or, in one method or another, you can open it, no problem.
Yeah.
And Thomas, just to clarify, when you created that document, it was created as a Microsoft Word file, not as a Google Doc, correct?
Yep, that's correct. So I just used a Microsoft Word document and inserted equations, saved it, and sent it to you through Google Classroom.
Right.
But yeah.
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands you have to use Microsoft Word for this. You cannot use Google Docs.
Well, you can. You just have to. Go ahead, Thomas.
Oh no, please, Jenny.
No, it's, I think we were going to say the same thing. You can make a Google Docs file. You just have to, from Google Docs, you just need to export it to a DOCX or create a DOCX copy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So So equations, I've tested this with California School for the Blind before, where we've created a Google Doc with a mix of text and equations. And yeah, what Jenny said is absolutely correct. We exported to a DOCX file, and it worked great on the Polaris.
That's good to know because I was not aware of that. So thank you both.
And so if you are struggling with Braille delivery, especially regarding math, using Microsoft Word and Equation Editor is an easy and very simple way of providing Braille delivery to your students. You could do it through email, you could do it through Google Classroom. There's a whole host of things. I mean, you could do it through Dropbox. There's a whole host of different things. If you have a question, if you're particularly struggling with Braille delivery, especially with the current situation going on and all the distance education, send us an email and we can help walk you through your problem. All right, another comment. Totally agree with full page graph. A graph is a visual tool. A mathematician does not necessarily need to draw the graph to understand it. Just seeing the equation of a parabola, for example, you can just find out the important features and then describe the graph in words. Very well said. And then Kathy from New Zealand wrote, "Thank you, really helpful webinar. We will be joining others as well." Excellent, Kathy. I think that's all of the current questions, comments. If you have anything else, go ahead and raise your hand if you feel like using your voice. You could also type into the chat.
I just quickly want to say thank you all for sticking with us. It's been a much longer webinar than we had planned, but the comments, the questions were all good. It's always good to see Jenny. I believe Earl is also with us. Earl Harrison from Minnesota. He is our Midwestern and sales manager. And so thank you to all the HIMSS staff who is here, as well as Jenny from Selvis, and certainly all of you for being here today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be with us.
All right, so we have another question here from Rhonda. Rhonda, you're unmuted now.
Rhonda, we can hear you, or we can't hear you.
Rhonda, if you got a question, go ahead and ask it. All
we
right.
are not hearing Rhonda.
No, let's give her a minute. A couple more comments. Thanks, great as always. Thank you, it's been great. Want to attend the math conversion meeting? Earl, please let me know. All right, Karen, I'm gonna make a note.
Rhonda, if you can't ask your question, maybe you can type it in the chat.
All right. Well, Rhonda, if you can still hear us, go ahead and shoot us an email. Send your question to anybody at HIMSS. So at that, thank you guys for attending. It was great to have such a great turnout. We are recording this and we are going to be posting it on our YouTube channel. You will get an email notification once this goes live. So if you want to revisit it, then please go ahead and watch that video. We usually get this turned around in a couple days. So hopefully you'll get an email with the YouTube link. Check out hims-inc.com/webinars to check out the other upcoming webinars. And one other thing, I believe that we're going to be doing a promotion where if you purchase a HIMSS Braille product, we're going to offer an hour of free training. So that's going on, I believe, this month. So if you are interested in purchasing a HIMSS product, now is a good time to use it. So you can take advantage of 1 hour free training. If you need more, we could go ahead and discuss that, but there's no time like now. So
Thanks so much, everybody.
all right, thank you.